So ensuring that rural and underserved communities are not left behind in the digital age is a critical issue for both government and industry. So for our next discussion, we are going to bring West Virginia to Washington, where we're going to hear from two leaders who are going to talk about engaging multiple stakeholders to improve connectivity in communities. So please welcome to the stage our next panelists, and they're going to be having a conversation with moderator Rebecca Baker, who's the deputy team leader of the IP Technology and Privacy News section of Bloomberg Law.
Thank you very much. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Rob Hinton, who is the chairman of the West Virginia Broadband Enhancement Council, and Charlie Denny, the vice president of government relations and special projects at Alpha Technologies. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here today at Bloomberg Next. Now, the West Virginia Broadband Enhancement Council was formed about 2 years ago and then enacted in code as part of the Department of Commerce last year. Before the council was formed, tell me a little bit about the state of broadband in West Virginia.
I think the most precise word to use is confusion. When we look at rural communities, we look at a high-cost area to deploy broadband. We have a reliancy on subsidies such as Connect America Fund, as well as some other subsidies coming from maybe USDA, RUS. There's a big community involvement when trying to bring connectivity to rural areas. And what we found was that there were a lot of communities that lacked connectivity, that lacked broadband access, but did not understand what the first step was or how to go and try to find solutions for bringing connectivity and working with the private carriers that were in that area. So confusion, I think, is the best word.
Okay, and a lack of broadband access, what does that mean for West Virginians when they don't have the access that their neighbors in other states have?
Right. So I mean, you can imagine what it's like to not have internet access, right? We are very fortunate that we are in metro areas that have internet access. You can't access the internet. Children can't do schoolwork. Telemedicine is an issue. Opportunities for telework, opportunities for training. There's a big disconnect that you have when you don't have connectivity in rural West Virginia.
And so tell me a little bit about how the council was formed and sort of the genesis of the organization.
Sure. So we were formed in the legislature of 2016. We had our first organizational meeting in the fall of 2016. We're represented with 13 voting members that have representation from all over the state, each congressional district. And we also have representation from the legislature.
Okay. And the purpose of the council is to improve broadband and to bring it to these underserved areas.
Yes, improving awareness, creating resources that will enable communities to have the ability to get connected. One of the major initiatives that we put forth was encouraging public-private partnerships. Rather than encouraging government-owned and operated networks, right? We want to have the communities partner with private carriers, let the private carriers do what they do best. That's their core competencies. Communities have the ability to go after certain tranches of funding that may not be available for private carriers. So that was one of the big things. We also advocated to the governor to open up small city block grants, which is a HUD program dedicated specifically for water. In the past, we were able to achieve about 20% of that to get dedicated to broadband projects. In our first year, we had 26 counties represented with 12 applications. In our second year, we had 9 applications with an additional 11 counties. So we have 37 counties in West Virginia that are undergoing technical consulting for planning of broadband projects. The importance there is that there is going to be funding available through what's called the eConnectivity Pilot Program. $600 million is going to be available sometime in 2019. Having planning projects in process right now positions these communities, as well as the private carriers that they're working with, to be able to put together programs to go after the funding and achieve expansion.
That's great. And talking about, kind of steering more towards, the public-private partnerships. Tell me about Alpha Technologies is based in Washington State. Tell a little bit about how Alpha Technologies basically joined forces with the Broadband Council to help West Virginia expand broadband.
Well, actually, Alpha Technologies is a homegrown business in West Virginia.
Okay.
And we started out life as many companies do, as a small break-fix technology company. And in 2011, we bought a data center. And that data center had been the data center that was the global operations for the Union Carbide Corporation. And Union Carbide, of course, was bought up by Dow Chemical Company, and that went on the market. So we decided that we would make a run and buy that. And our objective was to become the cloud for our area, for our community. But we discovered that the availability and the cost of the broadband circuits that it was going to take to make that happen simply wasn't available. Or if it was available, it was incredibly expensive, and the build times were quite long. So back before we didn't allow liquor in the office anymore, we got the idea one day to build our own broadband. And so we have built 35 miles of fiber through downtown Charleston and South Charleston, West Virginia. And through talking with people at the Broadband Council, we came to understand what it means for these different communities. Now, Alpha Technologies primarily is in the commercial sector, but we've built open access fiber, so anybody who wants to be on that fiber will have that fiber available to them.
Terrific. And so a little bit, tell me about the working with the council and on projects, and also there's been some legislation that's been passed in the last year that's helped, I think, maybe improve the partnership or allowed you to take steps forward into increasing broadband.
It has. The council meets once a month, and all the providers show up at the council meeting. We tease Rob that we show up in self-defense as much as anything else. But the council has been very effective in organizing, letting everybody see what's going on and what the needs are. And carriers have taken it upon themselves to think that we can build to this area or we can build to that area. And I think most of that information and most of that statistical information has come from the Broadband Council. Okay. One of the most effective things that Rob has done is they have created a UGLA, is that how you pronounce that? UGLA?
Speed test.
UGLA test. And we encourage everybody at every opportunity to go in and take the speed test. Because what we found that the published speeds or the claimed speeds by the carriers are not even close to what they say they are. So by doing that, we've opened up new census tracts for construction funds. So it's been incredibly helpful into seeing what's really served and what's unserved, and making those distinctions and seeing what revenues are going to be available for that.
The FCC does twice a year 477 reporting, and it's done by providers. The FCC acknowledges, as well as NTIA, that may not be the most accurate way, but it is the current method, and they're looking at new methods to do broadband mapping. For instance, we have about 8 counties in the central part of the state, which is one of the most disconnected areas of the state, that all register as 100% covered and all have 100% access to 25x3, which is the level of broadband. Okay. With the speed test initiative, what we have done is we've given residents and businesses the ability to go take a speed test. We geolocate their location, and then we create our own shapefile map, which is the same thing that's done with the 477. We've actually entered into an agreement with NTIA to do a pilot program one of our goals that we want to achieve through the state's speed test initiative is to have comparative data. So we have 477 data that comes from providers, and it's at the census block level. Well, we can have speed testing done at the address level. Let's have comparative data and see where the gaps are, see where the inefficiencies are in mapping.
Great. Tell me a little bit about the pieces of legislation that were passed. I think there was 3 bills in particular, and how each of those bills has allowed you to further expand broadband, either by doing community outreach to actually laying fiber in the ground.
Sure. So one of the first ones I'll talk about, Charlie, is the loan insurance program, which that's embarrassing. I'm sorry.
Sure.
This watch.
Technology.
Technology, Internet of Things, right? So the loan insurance program, access to capital is an issue for small to medium-sized carriers, and small to medium-sized carriers are most likely going to be the carriers that go into rural areas, most likely because they are there, their business is located there. But banks don't know what to do with a carrier that wants to put up, let's say, 10, 15, 20 miles of fiber. Banks first look at, what do I do if they go default? What am I going to do with 15 miles of fiber? I can't sell it. So what we did was we worked with the state EDA to create a loan insurance program that insures up to 90% of the construction cost and up to $10 million per year. A company can do that and have a revolving fund every year. So that increased the access to capital. We have about $20 million worth of projects that have been funded or in process right now. So that has been in effect for about a year. So that has worked really, really well. I'll let you talk about the DIG once, but the other thing was access to right-of-ways. Biggest impediment in West Virginia has always been access to right-of-ways. We had very archaic policy and code that only allowed rate-regulated utilities, companies with a tariff, to access the roadbed right-of-ways. In today's environment, you're seeing companies like Google that are going into the space of putting in fiber. Now, I think they've abandoned that and gone into wireless. But however, you have a lot of companies that are into technology, into data, that are running fiber throughout the country that do not want to be a telecommunication company but can provide dark fiber. So we needed to change the law on how we define utility. So we expanded that to our definition is you don't have to be rate regulated. If you're providing data services or you want to install fiber, you can get into the right of way. So far, we've had one announcement for long haul tier 1 fiber going through our state. And we have several interests on other companies and firms that want to install long haul fiber. The importance of that, I'm sorry I'm going long-winded here.
No, please.
The importance of that is a big challenge in West Virginia is backhaul. One, we do not have adequate open access middle mile network in the state of West Virginia. It is improving, but it needs to get better. Two, the next impediment is the access of long haul tier 1 connections to places like Ashburn, Columbus, Pittsburgh. We don't have an abundance of that kind of fiber as a result of restrictive policy that was in place.
The incumbent providers are masters of shaping the environment to thwart competition. And when we started our project, we found one that was really quite interesting. There was a policy with the Public Service Commission that Frontier Communications had taken really good advantage of. If I build a new office building, I've got to build conduit from my office building out to the utility point of presence. But once I do that, Frontier claims ownership of that conduit. And the Public Service Commission was supporting that. So even if we built all of this fiber, we were going to be really hard-pressed to get it connected into buildings because a lot of that conduit has to go under existing infrastructure, sidewalks. Some of it is a long distance from the highway. And so I was talking to one of our state senators one day, and he was talking about things that we need to be doing. And I said, Senator, even if we build it, we can't get to the building. And he said, why not? So I explained to him this policy. And he looked at me and says, that can't possibly be true. And I said, but it is. And he said, can't be. Well, it is. So he brought legal staff in, And we had a discussion about it, and they said that can't possibly be true, but it is. So we had them call the Public Service Commission and validated that that was, in fact, what was going on. So the senator wrote a one-paragraph bill that says whoever paid for it owns it. Whoever paid for it controls it. That was Senate Bill 678, and it passed overwhelmingly in both the Senate and the House in spite of the strenuous objections of Frontier. And the bill then goes to the Public Service Commission for rulemaking, and they made a last stand at trying to prevent that from happening. But now competitive carriers actually have access to the customer through facilities that the customer had actually paid for.
What a novel concept.
What an idea. I mean, hey, who knew, right? So the other thing that happened, and what stopped Google Fiber in its tracks, were pole rights, access to the utility poles. And we saw in the testimony on the hearing on the bill that there were carriers, competitive carriers, who've been waiting for over a year for one pole permit application. And after that testimony in the legislature, they managed to get that the next day. But we did a bill, what they call it, Rob, not the dig once, the one touch bill, which says that one qualified contractor can move everything on the pole that needs to be moved in a way that it has to be done. And that saves, 3 to 4 months on getting something done. And the ink wasn't dry on the governor's signature before they filed a lawsuit on that one. So I think the FCC has got a new policy now that I'm not totally familiar with it, but I think it addresses a lot of those concerns. And then in the last session, the same bill that created the Broadband Council has what's called a dig once policy. And that says that if you're going to use the public right-of-way to dig a trench or directional bore, whatever methodology you're going to use to put fiber in the ground, you have to advertise that for 60 days and allow anybody else who wants to be in that trench to come in and share that cost. And there were some people who thought that was a really good idea, and there's some people who think it's a really bad idea. And the legislature will be reviewing that again. But the governor of West Virginia, Jim Justice, did us all a huge favor when he declared that the value of the right-of-way for the construction purposes was going to be $0. And so anything that's taxed, if you want more of it, make the tax low.
Absolutely.
So I think it's going to be a big stimulus.
So it seems that in state government there's been a lot of buy-in, a lot of support. How about local government? You're going into these counties, these smaller communities. Tell me about what the reception has been there, because sometimes, local governments can be very protective of, some company, somebody coming in. But that's not my understanding what your experience has been.
Everybody wants it. The State Highway Department kind of set the agenda here for us. I'd gone down to talk to the economic development man on the route we wanted to do on our first 35 miles, and we needed a lot of their right-of-ways. And we talked about what was possible, what wasn't possible, what kind of access you have to highways, what's limited access, et cetera, et cetera. And then we got down to that sticky point about, what are we going to pay you for it? And because there are no hard and fast rules about that. And just in sort of a playful way, I suggested, you wouldn't take a little fiber in exchange for that right-of-way, would you? And without even looking up, he said, I'll take 4 strands. So we traded 35 miles not 35 miles, but about 25 miles of right-of-way to the highway department for 4 strands of fiber. And we then took that same suggestion to the city of Charleston, and they bought into that. They liked the idea, and we're going to connect about 20 locations of the city's offices and save them a ton of money. And then we went to South Charleston, where our data center is actually located. And the mayor there, Frank Mullins, I thought had a very pragmatic approach. He said, Charlie, when you get all those contracts done and everybody signed off on them, said, then bring them to me and we'll do the same thing. And I really sort of needed his right-of-ways sooner than that. And I said, well, Mayor, what's the issue? And he said, well, I'm going to let the state of West Virginia and the city of Charleston pay the legal fees, so we'll just copy theirs and go about there. So we did that, and we got those right-of-ways, and we're working on some other projects that are coming up. And pretty much everybody's decided that trading the right-of-way for fiber is a good idea.
Absolutely. And tell me a little bit about how the benefit from Alpha Technologies. Are all these West Virginia's now Alpha Technologies customers? Or tell me about maybe the incentive for Alpha Technologies to do all this work and to make all these initiatives?
Beyond our wildest dreams, frankly. We underestimated how much demand was pent up. Our project will cost us $5 million. And we haven't finished it yet, probably won't finish it until the end of the year. And we have already sold enough subscriptions on it to service the debt.
Wow.
And it's not even lit. So I think we're going to do very well with it.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Rob, tell me, how much more broadband access does West Virginia have than they did a year ago, 2 years ago?
Excuse me. It's hard to say. If you look at FCC 477 mapping, we have moved the needle quite a bit. But I think the best way to answer that is where we were 2 years ago. We had 0 conversations happening. We had 0 projects being planned. We had a very, very, very small amount of private carriers that were looking at expanding. So folks like Alpha Technologies was not looking at expanding 2 years ago. We have a lot of those projects in the hopper. We have a lot of those projects in process. So I would say that we're kind of in a transition phase where we're going to see that connectivity expand and grow. To give you an idea of, Charlie talked about his buy-in with a local government. Then you have local community buy-in. We did a project, grassroots type project, where we did a fixed wireless broadband, which we're talking about rural areas that have 10 people per square mile, so really rural. Wireless seems to be a solution for that. We did a community meeting to talk about another area that could potentially be affected by this. We told a story that we met with landowners and said, we can't pay you any money for leasing property, but we can build towers and provide broadband. And they agreed to have a tower built on their property. Just in return, they would receive broadband service. Once I said that at this meeting, about 20 hands in the meeting went up, and I said, let me guess. You all are going to ask the same question, which is, I have a hill or a tall mountain on my property, and you can build a tower on mine as long as you can bring broadband service. And that seems to be the case all throughout the state that is disconnected still.
Wow.
It is such a demanded, it's not a utility, but it is a utility. How we use it and how it's becoming demanded day in and day out as we move forward. So I think that what you're going to see in the next 3 to 4 years is you're going to see an expansion of long-haul fiber in the state, which is going to be an expansion of backhaul, which is going to be a critical mass for more middle-mile build-out, more last-mile build-out, reduced cost of operations, and I think you're going to see a great connectivity in West Virginia.
I mean, yeah, that's fantastic because they, especially homeowners in rural areas. I mean, they have the land. They don't have the service. It seems like a pretty fair exchange.
And you cannot sell your house if you cannot have broadband.
Good point.
That is definitely something that occurs in rural areas.
Good point.
Marketability.
Absolutely. And so, in terms of priorities, is the council kind of looking, going maybe cities, suburbs, rural, or going to businesses, schools, homes? Or tell me a little bit about maybe the Venn diagram of of service.
One of the things that empowering the carriers that are in the respective areas of the state. Matching those carriers with the community leaders and champions that are pushing forward with creating a plan, trying to devise a solution, whether it be fiber expansion or whether it be a hybrid fiber wireless project. We're having that done, like I said, in 37 different counties. So it's basically an all hands on deck. Empower local communities, empower individual providers, work to find solutions to negotiate contracts of expansion and build out, try to mitigate costs, get to an agreement there, and have projects going on all throughout the state simultaneously, rather than focusing on one area as being a project that's state-led. One of the things that we say as a council is that the council chairman or council members are not going to come to your community and help you solve the problem. It's going to take a community effort and a local community effort, and it's going to take partnership with providers in order to solve that problem. And I think once you empower communities, they have the intellectual capacity and they have the knowledge and they have the enthusiasm for that area to really push forward. And we've done it successfully in the state with water and sewer projects. All we're doing is we're just taking water and sewer out of the equation and inputting a broadband infrastructure. Very simple.
Exactly, the utility model, as you said. So now that this has been in motion, the laws have been changed or altered, things are moving forward. Has the council been approached by any other broadband providers? Does Alpha have some competition coming for the services of West Virginia?
One of the great things about a free market is competition. You need to have competition. It creates a better marketplace. Alpha is a great company, and even with competition, Alpha is still going to be a great company. The harsh way to say this is that the government body, the Broadband Council, we're neutral. We want the best provider to be able to survive in the market and be successful in the market and provide service. Whomever that may be, it's up to Alpha's team to make sure that they're the best company in the state.
Fair enough.
Actually, when new actors enter the ecosystem, new alliances are formed, and we're the newest in that ecosystem. And we're already making deals with other carriers. They're building fiber for us. We're building fiber for them. We're trading strands for here and strands for there for different locations. So within our own little ecosystem, although there is competition, there's also a great deal of cooperation with one another.
That's great. That's wonderful. Great. Well, I think we're going to open up to some questions.
We have a lot of questions. What's the one piece of advice you would give rural communities who are looking to expand broadband access?
That's a good question. I would say start the conversation with the incumbent provider that's in your area, but then also acknowledge that the provider that's in your area is not the only option. Like Charlie said, there's a lot of synergies with different carriers that they can have interconnect agreements and they can transport over other networks. So there may be a cable company that's in the area that's not providing the level of service that the residents think that they deserve or think that they should receive. There's an opportunity for other methods and other ways to get into that community. The other thing is that I'm pretty sure that many other states are far ahead of us from a standpoint of having a broadband council and or broadband office, probably partnering with that resource. Looking at the USDA, RUS, as a resource for capital funding. The conversation has to start with the folks that know what they're doing, the providers.
Who's looking at the security of this new broadband, and are those responsible for implementing the access to it concerned about the security of it?
I'll let Charlie answer that question.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Security is a huge concern. And Alpha Technologies, like most companies our size, will have at least one security officer. We really have 3 full-time people devoted to the security of our own network. And one of the things that Alpha has done by becoming a cloud provider for a lot of businesses is we have the resources to enforce things that other smaller companies can't do. Most smaller companies really don't have effective policies, or they're not enforced. And what we can do through the access with cloud computing is help people implement those policies and help them enforce those policies.
How does the groundwork of the fiber lines work with the DOT and city to prepare the area for connected communities?
I'm sorry,
How is the work that you're doing helping to prepare areas for connected communities?
I still didn't understand what you said.
Connected communities?
Right.
How is the work that you guys are doing helping to prepare areas of West Virginia to be connected communities?
Well, I mean, the better connectivity that you have, obviously you can't have a connected community without fiber, without broadband connectivity. So the opening access to right-of-ways, opening and reducing barriers to infrastructure development and expansion gives those communities the ability to move in that direction.
What has been the most valuable lesson you've learned from having to partner with multiple stakeholders to solve the digital divide?
I wasn't in politics before I took this position, so I definitely have had a crash course in gaining consensus. But I guess, you know, one of the, I don't remember the name of the book, but one of the critical things, the leadership that this individual wrote was empathy and finding out what each individual side has important to them. What are the value things that they have? Obviously, a community is going to want connectivity at all costs. A provider is, they have to make money. They have to be profitable. As a government agency, as a government in general, as a state of West Virginia, we have to acknowledge that internet service providers, ISPs or WISPs, wireless internet service providers, or mobile carriers, in order for us to have great connectivity, we have to create an environment, a business environment that increases profitability, which then increases return on investment, which then increases reinvestment into the area. So it's a matter of balancing all the stakeholders, finding out what's important to each, and then coming to a common ground on consensus. And Charlie and I were just debating a legislative topic that needs to be reworked, and kind of doing that same thing in the green room. So I would say that just understanding everybody's needs is the biggest learning curve that I've had to go through.
And I'll add this to that. Whatever time you think it's going to take to do something, increase it by a factor of 4, wait 2 weeks, and then double that.
Rebecca, we'll take one more and then I'll pass it back to you. How are you guys communicating this to the people, the general public in West Virginia, and have you run into any challenges in doing so?
In communicating with public? Yes. When most of your communication is done on social media and that kind of medium, it's very difficult to have that engagement from areas that are unconnected, right? We also have a speed test initiative where if you don't have internet, how do you take a speed test? So there's lots of challenges. I mean, we're very unique in where we are right now. So we have actually mailers that we still do to get to the areas that are unconnected. We do have social media to communicate, but we also do road tours where we'll go into a community and have a community meeting and connect with the community that way.
I write a column for the state business newspaper that I submit about every 6 weeks. And we'll address a different topic every time about that. And there are lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of economic development meetings in West Virginia. And in fact, I think every third person in West Virginia is an economic developer. So we see a lot of that, and you show up at those things, and the conversation will always take place.
Absolutely. So now, do you think you could be a model for other states with significant rural areas, I mean, like in the Deep South or the Far West, in some of the western states? Do you think that the initiatives, the council, and the partnerships you have could serve as a model for other states around the country?
That would be very encouraging to what we're doing, and anything that we're doing in the state of West Virginia is obviously fully transparent from a standpoint of we want to share what we're doing, but we also steal things from other states as well. So I mean, not everything we do is original, but yeah, if we can create a model that other states can use, and West Virginia can be a leader in bridging the digital divide and increasing connectivity at a rapid pace that somewhat matches the pace that the technology is moving, that would be very great.
Absolutely. Imitation's the sincerest form of flattery. So
Right.
what are some of the, how have you flattered some other states by maybe modeling some of what you've done on what other states have done?
So Virginia is one of the things that we've actually taken. We've taken something from. Virginia has, once you obviously get into the southwestern portion of Virginia, it really matches the terrain and the geography and the demographics of West Virginia. One of the things that they had developed, I think it was a couple of years ago, was a broadband office. So I mean, that's one of the things that we've taken, that we're trying to move an initiative, that taking the council and putting some continuity and sustainability with the staff and resources and so on and so forth.
Great. Wonderful.
I wouldn't advise anybody to do anything the way I've done it.
Oh, why do you say that?
Well, it's local. Mm-hmm. All politics is local, mm-hmm. and every community has its own personality and its own way of doing things. Mm-hmm. And I think in order to make that work, you have to work within that the framework of your own community. Okay. And you can have two of them side by side that'll be completely different.
Okay. All right, last question. As 2019 rapidly approaches, what is the top priority of your partnership?
I wouldn't mind making a couple of bucks. I'm getting old. I need to retire at some point in time. So, a few shekels here and there wouldn't be a bad idea.
All right. And with that, I want to thank my panelists, Rob Hinton and Charlie Denny. A round of applause. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca, Rob, and Charlie. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Keel. You've heard my voice coming from the front row over here asking your questions. Now I have some questions of you. Bloomberg Next is designed to be a two-way conversation. So we've worked with the team at Visa to put together some poll questions that we're going to be asking you guys for the next couple of days. If you were here yesterday, you already know the drill. Break out your apps. You can see on the screen next to me here how to access the app. There's two ways. Either pull out the program that's in front of you, scan the QR code there, or just go to bnext18.app and you'll be able to open up the Summit app there. If you look at the bottom bar, you'll see a piece that looks kind of like a bar graph. Just click on that, and that's going to get you to the polling question. If you're having any issues, just make sure your phone's not in private mode. Grab a member of the Bloomberg Next team, and we'll be happy to help you with the next question. All right, everybody ready? Here's our first question of the day. Where do you most see and experience the benefits of connected devices and the Internet of Things? Is it at your home? Is it where you work? Is it on your commute? Or is it where you shop? Let's see what you guys have to say. So far, it looks like a lot of people saying at my home, a lot of people who probably are using Alexas, who are using controlling the heat or the air conditioning in their house with connected devices. Good number of people also saying where I work, on my commute. Not as many people saying where I shop. There's lots of connected devices there too with the ways that you guys are paying, but it looks like almost more than half of our group is saying at my home is really the place where most of you are using connected devices. We'll see how that grows even more over the next few years. So we're going to take a short break, come back in just about half an hour at 11 o'clock. We've got a great lineup for you for the rest of the morning. We've got the mayors of Tulsa, Oklahoma, Baltimore, Maryland, Washington, D.C. We're going to have some great conversations on building connected communities. So we'll see you guys right back here, 11 o'clock sharp. Thanks.